I would like to welcome everyone on our call today, especially my friend Rik Deitsch. And what was it, about 450 of us just last Saturday had the privilege of hearing you from the stage several times. And that was in Las Vegas. And maybe use that as a way to introduce you for any of you people that haven't had the treat of listening to Rik. If you're interested in health, you're going to enjoy the presentation today. And maybe a way to introduce you, Rik, is the way I introduced you to one of my Uber drivers last week. I can't help myself. Form, that's always a fun way to do. FORM, acronym, family, occupation, recreation, and then the message. And so I'm doing that with my driver, who's just delightful. And so many of those people, they're really people persons. And so I'm just how long you've been driving, how long you've lived in Las Vegas, and getting to know them and finding out that they're pretty entrepreneurial. And I says, hey, listen, we need to talk because we're looking for people like you. In fact, we're with a startup company. It's only 2 years old, but on the other hand, it's ran by a biochemist who is a category creator, 25 years in doing billions of dollars in product development for all these other companies, but now he's doing it for himself. And it just happens that we're here in Las Vegas at a convention because the CEO lives right here. And oh my goodness, if you're interested in health and want to make a difference and look at the best business I've ever seen. And here's my email, here's my phone number. And I was just irresistible. So I did that to all my Uber drivers.
Sign me up.
And anybody else, sign me up. But when you look at what we have, this is just big deal stuff. And I want to personally thank you for helping me with a health predicament, a crisis 6 years ago. And that's where I came across my very favorite product. But we got some other cool stuff that will, in fact, it's more than a breath spray. So let's start out by talking about that because you pretty much own that now. You get around on the internet, look around, you can see a lot of things specifically to that, but it's all you. So go ahead and fill in a little bit more about this, and let's see your new PowerPoints on specifically plus
Okay.
relief.
I'd be happy. I wouldn't say this because it's kind of funny you talk about your Uber driver, but whenever I sit on a plane, I immediately gauge whether or not I want to talk to the guy next to me. And this is because a friend of mine who was in network marketing was flying from Minneapolis to LA and he was in first class. And he said the guy sitting next to him was a chatterbox. He just wouldn't shut up. All I wanted to do was go to sleep. And this guy just kept talking, talking. He was in t-shirt and jeans and a baseball cap. We finally land in LA and he goes, well, what do you do? So he said, well, I'm in network marketing, whatever. So my friend tells him with network marketing, he goes, what do you do? I make movies. Anything I might have heard of? He goes, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Poltergeist. He goes, he'd been sitting next to Steven Spielberg for 4 hours and didn't know it and didn't talk to him. So whenever I sit down next to someone in the plane, I said, heading out or heading home? That's my line, heading out or heading home. And it doesn't matter what they say. Like if they're heading home, I say, was this business or pleasure? If they're heading out, business or pleasure? Half the time it's usually business. And I say, what do you do? And at least in 15 seconds, I find out if this person's worth talking to.
I use the same thing, Rick.
But I make sure because I would hate to be sitting next to Steven Spielberg and not know it. Oh, it says you disabled screen sharing.
Oh, okay, did that work?
Yep, I'm in.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about this concept of plus relief, okay, and understand where it comes from and how I got into it to begin with. So here's me with one of our Cobras. So I've been working with drugs from Venoms for since 1995. Okay, so it's almost 30 years. And the work I did down in South Florida was in cone snail venom. So we used to go into the ocean and catch venomous snails. And cone snails, if people haven't heard me talk about this, they're these really pretty snails. They're conical shaped and they sit at the bottom of the ocean. They stick out their tongue and their tongue looks like a worm. So when a fish comes to eat the worm, it stabs them. It's got a little radular tooth at the end of the tongue. It stabs the fish, injects a venom, a paralytic venom. Once the fish is paralyzed, it pulls it in and eats it. There's over 500 species of cone snails are all over the world. And we would extract the venom and study the venom and eventually use them to make drugs. And so one of the first drugs I ever worked on When we worked on it, it was called SNX-111. It became ziconotide, and now it's actually an approved drug called Prialt, Prialt, and it's a pain drug from cone snail venom. So that was an alpha conotoxin. As I was working on that, I found that a lot of people were working with Cobra Venom, which had alpha cobra toxin. Alpha cobra toxin is very similar to the alpha conotoxin I've been working on, but, and this is big, it is much easier to milk a snake than a snail. You don't get a lot of venom out of a snail. You have drops of venom. They're very hard to milk. In fact, I'll tell you how to do it. You basically blow up a balloon, and then you rub the balloon on a goldfish. So you get the smell of the goldfish in the balloon, and you hold it near the snail, and the snail thinks it's a fish and stabs the balloon. And that gives you a couple of drops of venom get collected into the balloon. So with this, it's actually really easy to milk a cobra. There's videos of this on our website. They put a thick piece of cellophane over like a goblet, a thick glass goblet, and they have the snake bite through the plastic. And it massages the snake's gums and it releases venom into the bottle, into the glass. So it's very, very easy to milk a snail. We get lots of venom from it. And so for the last 30 years or so, I've been studying cobra venom. And the use of cobra venom peptides for the treatment of pain goes back over 100 years. In fact, the first publications were in 1897, where they treated pain in dogs with cobra venom. And so now my public biotechnology company, we have 21 patents, but we have 3 key patents utilizing peptides from cobra venom for the treatment of pain, for the treatment of autoimmune diseases, and we've been studying mostly multiple sclerosis, and for the treatment of viruses, we've studied HIV, herpes, and rabies. And so we have lots and lots of research in that. We have new intellectual property using these same concepts to treat Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, and we're working on an animal model of that. And then also as a nerve aging countermeasure, working with the Department of Defense to potentially use this stuff to prevent damage to our nerves from nerve agents like sarin gas, ricin gas, and Novichok. So it's really very fascinating the way this stuff works. But let's talk about this whole concept of neurotoxins as a drug. Okay, so I already talked about cone snail venom. That's a picture of a cone snail, and I worked on the drug Prialt. But bee venom has a cytotoxin called melitin that's been used in clinical research. And then there are approved drugs from rattlesnakes, for example, crotamine. That's a blood thinner. That's an approved blood thinner. And the scorpion venom has caleotoxin, marotoxin. Those are both approved drugs for blood pressure. Funnel web spider, robustatoxin, and atratotoxin. Tarantula is human toxin, another blood pressure medicine. Black widow, alpha latrodotoxin, is another blood thinner. Gila monster venom, Byetta. So Gila monster venom was one of my first drugs also. That drug was exenatide, Exendin 4. And basically, researchers in the late 80s, early 90s noticed that when a Gila monster bit somebody, it didn't kill them, but they'd pass out. And the reason they passed out was severe hypoglycemia. All their blood sugar just went away. And they said, wow, that might be good for diabetics. And so they started doing the research and eventually launched the first GLP-1 inhibitor was Byetta. So what we see now is Ozempic and Wegovy, all those are in the same class of drugs. They're GLP-1 inhibitors. And I worked on the very first one, which was Byetta for diabetics. So we're not the first people using neurotoxins for the treatment of disease, but it is really a very new research because peptides are difficult. For the most part, they need to be injected. And so we've learned as we can stabilize peptides or protect them or denature them before use, that you can take them orally or use them topically. So when we think about pain in particular, people don't realize that there's different types of pain. Most pain that we deal with is what we call nociceptive pain. That's surface pain. That's the efferents, the nerves on the surface of your skin. That's a cut, a scrape, a burn. Those are all nociceptive pains. But there's deeper pains. There's neuropathic pain, which is pain that affects directly on the nerve. And mostly we think of neuropathic pain as diabetic neuropathy, which is the leading cause of neuropathic pain. But spasming the blood vessels in the head are migraine headaches. And there's 31 million Americans suffer from migraines. And that is a neuropathic type of pain. And then we have visceral pain. That's deep efferents. And most men will never experience visceral pain unless they've been shot or stabbed or have a kidney stone. So when a guy says he has a kidney stone, it's a pain he's never felt. That's because it's visceral pain. These are deep nerve efferents that are now in pain. Women experience visceral pain during childbirth. So when a woman says, you'll never experience like what I experienced in labor, she's right. It's a lot of pain and it's very deep pain. And most of the drugs that we use for pain don't touch that. They don't affect the visceral efferents or sometimes even the neuropathic efferents. They only deal with nociceptive pain. Now, if we look at pain severity versus side effects of the drugs, when we look at pain severity, let's look at this chart as if it's pain from 1 to 10 along the bottom. So from 1 to 4, those are like that's pain that's annoying. It can inhibit some of your functioning, but it's everything from a headache or just a sore back, things like that. But that's where you can take over-the-counter drugs. So you have acetaminophen, which is Tylenol. And for many, many, many years, everyone said that was the safest of the over-the-counters. But we find out that it does have a lot of side effects, including potential liver toxicity that can cause liver failure. So you'll see every bottle of acetaminophen has right on it, do not take too much, take as directed, may cause unreversible liver failure. And so you got to worry about that. Then the NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, like aspirin, which is acetylsalicylic acid, ibuprofen, naproxen. So you got your Motrin, Aleve, Advil. Those are NSAIDs. And the thing about NSAIDs is when you think about things you ingest, almost everything you ingest gets broken down in the stomach and then absorbed in the intestinal tract. NSAIDs are absorbed directly through the stomach mucosa. They don't get absorbed in the intestinal tract. So they are absorbed quickly, but they actually damage the mucus lining in the stomach mucosa when they get absorbed. And so it thins that mucosa. It can lead to bleeding, intestinal bleeding. It can lead to ulcers. In fact, one of the leading causes of death in the United States among people in their 80s and 90s are GI bleeds caused from NSAID abuse. So they're popping Motrin and ibuprofen and naproxen, and they're bleeding internally and they don't even know it. And they can wind up bleeding out. So that's just the over-the-counters. Once we get to pain that's like 4, 5, 6, that's what we call stage 2 pain. That's pain that interrupts your sleep or your work. And in that case, you're taking either high dose of the other over-the-counters, or now you're in the low doses of the opiates. And in those cases, we know what that is. It's drowsiness, dizziness. They're addictive. They slow down function. So they cause things like constipation, slowing of the heart, bradycardia. So tons and tons of side effects for these opiates. And of course, once you get to stage 3 pain, which is 7 to 10 on the 10-point scale, that's where you're in morphine, oxycodone, fentanyl. And these are all highly addictive with tons and tons of side effects. When you look at what we're offering, we actually treat all the way up to stage 3 pain. So it's stage 3 pain relief without the side effects. It's non-addictive, non-narcotic, non-opiate, really none of these issues. So how does it actually work? So one of the main receptors in the body, in the central nervous system, is the acetylcholine receptor. And the acetylcholine receptor carries all of these signals through the CNS, through the central nervous system, right to our brain. It's activated by acetylcholine. So 2 acetylcholines will attach to the side of the receptor. And the receptor is 5 subunits. There are 5 helices that move through the membrane. And you can see that picture on the right. It's a transmembrane channel. And what happens is, and it shows it very simply on the right of that picture, that it's closed or open. But what really happens is those side chain, those transmembrane helices have side chains that stick in the channel and block the channel. When 2 acetylcholines attach to the alpha subunits, all 5 of them turn. And when they turn, it's like the iris of a camera. It opens up that channel, and now ions can cross. And that's how all transmission occurs through the central nervous system. When those ions cross, it's just like electricity going through a wire. That's the power going through the nerve and allowing a signal to take place. What happens if you can't open that up all the time? Only some of the times. Okay, so what alpha Cobra does, that's in the Cobra Venom, is it blocks those receptors. It acts like a wedge between the alpha and delta subunits. So when the receptors try to turn, they can't, they get jammed. But it doesn't do it well. It doesn't really do it well. So it's not an agonist, it doesn't turn on the receptor. It's not an antagonist, it doesn't turn off the receptor. It's a modulator. It modulates that receptor. So it's not open all the time, it's not closed all the time. It's functioning appropriately. And when that has the effect of turning down big signals. So pain is a big signal. It turns it way, way down to be a little signal. So you can function. But it's important because even though it turns down the signal. It's not a numbing agent. It doesn't turn it off completely. And by doing so, you still feel the pain. You still know the pain is there. And that's really important because so many people take numbing agents, forget they have pain, and they wind up injuring themselves or re-injuring themselves. So it's cool to know that you have the pain, you can deal with it, you can function, but you're not going to re-injure yourself. Okay. So as I said, these proteins, especially the alpha toxin, turn down the volume of the pain signal. Now, this is registered or classified as a homeopathic drug, and this is kind of important. We were doing studies, and we have been doing studies with alpha toxin, modified alpha toxin for treating diseases like multiple sclerosis. But we went to the FDA back in 1997, and we said, I'm sorry, 2007, and we said, what, these have tons of safety data. The research goes back over 100 years. What do we need to do to get this to market? And they said, well, do you get it from a natural source? So, yeah, we get it right from cobras. We have a contract with the Cobra farm down in Homestead, Florida. We have about 300 cobras on the line. They get milked twice a month. So we know exactly where the Cobra venom is coming from. It's a validated source with validated venom. And they said, what's your dose? And these are microgram doses. Our average concentration is about 100 micrograms per ml. So 1 ml is about a day's dose. So the average dose is probably 5 to 10 micrograms of actual Cobra venom. So they told us that we actually qualified as a homeopathic, which is a infinitesimal dose of a natural product that's in the homeopathic pharmacopoeia of the United States. And nausea tripudians and nausea coathia are in the homeopathic pharmacopoeia. Cobra venom has been studied as a homeopathic drug. So that's how we're registered. Now, because it's a drug, we can actually make some claims. We can claim to treat pain and inflammation when most dietary supplements cannot make medical claim, no claim to the treatment of symptom or disease. We can make claims to diseases that can be self-diagnosed, like osteoarthritis, and pain that is not just due to overexertion, but actual pain due to disease state. So it allows us to make a lot more claims on the product than we otherwise could. The Plus Relief is supported by 47 published human clinical studies and over 20 safety studies and animal models. We have all of these studies. I got to see if it's on the website. I know I gave it to Rich Cotter for the Avini Health training, but we wrote an overview in 2008 that was published that is a review of how this works. How do these peptides work to stop pain and inflammation? And that's important too. I've been talking about pain, but those same receptors, that same alpha 7 subtype of the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor is found in the central nervous system, but it's also found on the surface of certain inflammatory white blood cells. Remember that inflammation is caused by the immune system. It's an immune mediated response. So by binding to that receptor on the immune cells, it actually stops the inflammatory cascade and stops it way upstream. And so it works differently than every other anti-inflammatory drug. So it's not only just pain relief, it's also it relieves inflammation. Now, we have it available as an oral spray and a topical gel. I usually recommend the oral spray for people that have systemic pain. You have osteorheumatoid arthritis, you have large areas of pain. You'll want to take the oral spray. We usually recommend anywhere from 4 to 5 sprays, 4 to 5 times a day to start. And it's important that you start at a higher dose and then you can lower it over time. And the reason for that is when that peptide binds to the receptor, it doesn't bind perfectly. It's actually a bad fit. It's kind of like if you ever put a key in a lock, it doesn't fit right, and you got to wiggle the key until it fits right, and then you can turn the lock. That's what's happening when this peptide attaches to the receptor. What happens though, and this is kind of unique among neurotoxic peptides, is that the receptor changes shape to accept the peptide. It's a phenomenon known as induced fit. Over time, the more you take the product, the more the receptor gets used to that conformational change. And so your body actually grows more sensitive to the product instead of resistant to it. And this is cool because it's the exact opposite of every other pain drug in the world. Every other pain medication, your body grows more and more resistant to it, necessitating a higher dose. So you take a bigger dose until you have something called the ceiling effect, where it just stops working. You have to switch drugs. You have to switch to something else. In this case, the more you take over time, the better it works and the less you need. So you can lower your dose over time and get the same benefit, which of course isn't good for us as a company selling product, but it's great for the consumer. It's great for the product user, and it's great for the patient. Okay. So we do recommend 4 to 5 sprays 4 to 5 times a day when you're first starting. It does take about 5 days to see maximized benefit. So it gets better and better. So this is nothing you take once. I can't stand when people call me, your product didn't work. Well, they took it once and their pain didn't go away. Well, it doesn't work like that. This is for chronic pain. So you want to take it every day, and over time, it's going to get better and better and better. Now, the topical gel, you rub that exactly where the pain is. Just put it on. It does feel a little greasy when you put it on. That's an illusion. Just let it alone. It's going to dry and absorb into your skin. So you put it on, let it sit for 30 seconds. It's going to absorb in. And wherever you have pain, you can rub it on, but it's especially effective in areas that have less fat or muscle. So your finger, your hands, your wrists, your feet, your ankles, your knees, your elbows, where there's not a lot of fat or muscle. That's where it works the best. But some people rub it on their neck. We've actually done studies with Nova Southeastern School of Dentistry, where they rub it on TMJ and relieve TMJ problems. Or like around the mouth when there's oral or dental problems. In that study, they actually looked at using the product pre and post surgery. And so they had some patients using it before surgery, some patients using it after oral surgery. But of course, this makes sense. This is intuitive that the patients use it before surgery, prophylactic, and after surgery had the best results. They had the least amount of swelling, the least amount of inflammation, the least amount of postoperative issues, and the least amount of pain. So it really was very effective before and after. We even have a customer that buys the product that owns a tattoo parlor in Los Angeles. And he, when he schedules someone for a tattoo, gives them the gel the day before and has them put the gel on that area before the tattoo. And then he gives them the tattoo and has them use it afterwards. So it stops the pain and the inflammation. But he says the tattoo sets better and it heals faster when they do that. So it's interesting. So that's your oral spray and topical gel. So potential side effects. The only real potential side effect is dehydration, and that's part of the inflammatory process. Remember, inflammation is caused by fluid buildup. So as you relieve that inflammation, the fluid leaves your body, can actually cause mild dehydration. So we say people that are using this, make sure you're drinking plenty of water. When people come to me and tell me that this product, I got a headache when I took your product, well, that's dehydration. I got muscle cramping when I took your product, that's dehydration. So for the most part, 99.9% of people are not going to have problems with this except for mild dehydration. So just make sure that you're drinking plenty of water. Okay. The other thing too is if you're on a pain protocol, no matter what it is, I recommend not stopping it when you start the plus relief. All right. This is not contraindicated with any other pain medicines. The mechanism of action is so wildly different than any other analgesic that it's safe to take together and can be synergistic. My point is, there are people that are on opiates, they're on high dose over the counters, and they say, okay, I'm going to try your stuff, and they stop taking everything else. And what happens, you have something called a rebound effect, where you actually have much more pain because you've stopped all the stuff that your body's used to. So I say, keep taking whatever you're taking and add the plus relief. Over a week or 2 weeks, you can start weaning off of everything else. And we have to date gotten over 1,000 veterans off of opiates with this product. So we've been working with disabled American veterans. We work with Colonel Mike Fuller, and it's been a mission of ours for the last 10 years to try to get these veterans off of opiates, which are destroying their lives. Now, aside from humans, pets have pain too. And sometimes it's hard to tell what's wrong with your pet. Humans can say, Doc, it hurts when I do this, it hurts here. Your dogs, your cats, they're limping around, they're off their food. It's hard to tell that they're in pain. Now, certainly both dogs and cats get arthritis. There's other forms of pain, especially in older dogs and cats. And the biggest issue is that there is no good treatment for pain in dogs and cats. The number one product for dog pain is Cosequin, which is just glucosamine, and that does help with arthritis, but it takes a long time, and it doesn't really have the pronounced effects that we see in humans over time. So dogs, they can give them Demerol or Tramadol, which are opiates, which really they just lay down and go to sleep. It doesn't really help much. Or NSAIDs, like humans take NSAIDs, but NSAIDs in a dog can cause all sorts of GI distress, diarrhea, constipation, nausea. So lots and lots of side effects. In cats, every single pain drug in cats causes kidney failure, every single one. So you can't give anything to a cat. The only time they give a pain drug to a cat is post-surgical, and it's usually one dose per surgically, you know? So our stuff, we have our Plus Relief for Pets. It's all natural. It's hypoallergenic chicken flavor. Dogs and cats love it. We've tested it in thousands of animals, and it's non-addictive, non-opiate, and it's amazing. You give this to an older dog or an older cat, within 24 to 48 hours, you're running around the house like a puppy or a kid. It's absolutely amazing. And I love this product for two basic reasons. First of all, I'm a dog lover. I've always had dogs, and I hate to see a dog in pain. So it's really amazing when I can give this to a dog and see them running around and living life and feeling great. The other thing too is, time and time again, we get accused of placebo effect with the Plus Relief, because humans experience placebo effect. They say, oh, that's supposed to make me feel better. And they take some sprays. Oh, your product really works great. And so people say you're selling snake oil. And I'll be clear, it's snake venom, not snake oil. But they say you're selling snake oil and you're in Florida, the land of the scam. Oh, it's a scam product. Now, we know that the Plus Relief works. There's tons of clinical evidence, but nothing's better than when you give this to a dog or a cat, you see them running around, because there's no placebo effect in a dog or a cat. When I give this to a dog that's limping around, they don't know that's supposed to make me feel better. And then when you see them running around and jumping up on the stairs and jumping up on the furniture, you know the product works. So it really, really, really supports the mechanism for the product. So that's why I love the Plus Relief for Pets.
I just one question talks about alpha cobra toxin, the word toxin. Do we need to worry about toxin because we're in the toxic removal business?
It's a different it's a neurotoxin, which is where I started. But yeah, so we remove heavy metals and volatile organic compounds. Neurotoxins are huge proteins. I mean, these things are bigger than the zeolite, they're huge proteins. And it's actually a 78 amino acid proteins, alpha cobra toxin. So it's not removed by the zeolite. It doesn't get removed by the zeolite. Do get broken down quickly, which is one of the reasons most of these peptide drugs have to be injected, because the body breaks them down so quickly. They have to be re all the time. Not to mention that the stomach cycle usually can destroy these peptides. But with our process, you not only need very little to be effective, and we protect it through the stomach cycle, so it does get absorbed well and get throughout the body. But let's talk about safety. So we've done safety studies now for over 20 years. We've actually given healthy volunteers the equivalent of a 30-month dose, what you'd have in 30 full bottles in one dose without side effect. So we know that it's incredibly safe and incredibly effective. So safety has not been an issue. I will say this, I didn't say this before, but as a natural product, some people will be allergic to this. Okay, we find it's about 0.1%, a little less than that. So a little less than 1 in 1,000 people will have a mild allergic response. So that's if you put on the gel and your skin gets itchy or whatever, you could be sensitive or allergic to it. If that happens, simply wash the area. And it should be fine. If you need to take an antihistamine, you can take an antihistamine, but it's an incredibly rare event and it's never dangerous. It's not an anaphylaxis sort of thing. It's simply an irritant for some people. So if you spray the oral spray and it feels scratchy or whatever in your throat, you can try to keep taking. A lot of people that were sensitive to it, that sensitivity goes away over time. But some people, there's going to be a small percentage of people that are going to be either sensitive or allergic to this that aren't going to be able to take it.
All right, you just gave a placebo thing, so people are going to be thinking about that.
Oh, sorry.
But I think that's a really good point. Another thing I think is really good, it is technically, a neurotoxin, and if you've been bit by a cobra, I think that would be a lot different than this, of course, but
Yes.
it appears rather than actually being toxic to the nerves, it seems to be almost regenerative or good for your nerves. There's a lot of stories where nerves start working better over time, and
That's a really good point. And actually, some snake toxins actually have nerve growth factors, NGFs, nerve growth factors that actually regenerate the nerve. But you think about it this way and think about just the evolution of a venomous animal. When a snake bites its prey, it doesn't want it freaking out. It doesn't want it upset. It wants it nice and happy, relaxed, because I'm going to eat you. And so the whole idea is part of that venom is exactly that, to open up those channels and have them relaxed and have them not in pain. That's all part of the etiology of the venom, what the venom's supposed to do. But and that's why we even started looking at neurotoxic venoms, because we're saying, if these are going to affect animals, is there a beneficial effect? And lots of things. In fact, one of the bases of homeopathy is that something that could hurt you at high doses is therapeutic at low doses.
That's beautiful. And it's natural, so you didn't have to spend $500 million in drug development and getting everything approved.
We're going to have to do that for like our MS drug. So we've had 300 patients on our multiple sclerosis drug. It's a modified alpha toxin, but it's the first drug ever even looked at in the world that reverses the symptoms of MS. We've gotten over 300 patients out of wheelchairs. And so we're now moving into our phase 2 studies. We're expanding the intellectual property that surrounds it. But I think we have the drug for MS that'll stop its forward progression completely and reverse symptoms over time. And then we're doing something similar in Lou Gehrig's disease. We actually modify the drug so it still binds to the receptor, but now it has an antioxidant attached, which can prevent the oxidative stress that's caused by ALS. So my hope is by the end of this year, we get the animal models completed. And if we're good in the animal models, that'll move forward with all the rest of the research.